Messages for my Palestinian brothers. My name is Eliyahu Yehuda. Um, and I would like to speak to my Palestinian brothers very straight out and have some facts established. Playing where the bigger victim is just going to perpetuate violence, because the idea that, someone's a big victim is going to just, what's the point of that? It just fuels the idea that we should deserve more pity, more sympathy, and more justification for retaliation. What I'm saying, this is the first time I've ever spoken to Palestinian brothers over video. Brothers in the sense that we're all humans, right? And sometimes humans have different words for different things. The place where I live, I call Hare Yehuda in Hebrew, an ancient language, ancient Hebrew. Hare Yehuda, the hills of Judea. You might, I understand that you've begun to call it the territories, the disputed territories, or even occupied territories. I'm not making a video now to transmit dispute. I want to just speak heart to heart, but before we do, we have to have common language. So when it's called Hare Yehuda, we look at before it was called Palestine. What was this area called? I want to refer you to a book here. Okay, it's in Arabic. So if you can read Arabic. Okay, now I'll show you here a little bit of English about what this book is. This is Torah. Okay, this is, as you would say, maybe your imam would call it Taurah. Okay, Torah. And you can hear the 5 books of Moses, of what you would probably call Nabi Musa. Now, I'm familiar that you can, here you go. Clearly this is Arabic, right? I'm familiar because I've spoken to many Muslims about this topic, and what they've told me is that their tradition is that Allah gave the Torah to the Bnei Israel, and then that the Bnei Israel maybe made some mistakes in how the Bnei Israel related to the instructions in the Torah. One example that's brought in the Quran is actually a dispute that was within the nation of Israel, a question about how to interpret the rules of Shabbat, what you call Sabbath, right? The conversation began like this. I said to this Palestinian brother, I said to him, I understand that, that the days of the week all have names, like chronological names, like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and that the 6th day of the week, Arabic calls it Yom Jima, right, meeting day, and the 7th day of the week is called Yom Sabbat, which is Yom Shabbat in Hebrew, right? And I said, well, can you tell me about why it's called Yom Sabbat? He said, well, everybody knows that Allah gave the Shabbat to Bnei Israel and told them to keep it. I said, okay. He said, but the Bnei Israel didn't keep it properly. They put out their fishing traps on the eve of the Sabbath for them to collect fish over the Sabbath, and then harvested those fish afterwards. I understand. I'd like to just give you some perspective. That question about whether tools can be set to put to work, for example, a washing machine, before the Sabbath to do its work on the Sabbath as a tool, is a question that was really discussed by our sages and decided much before Muhammad ever came onto this earth. And there were different schools of thought. So within the Yisrael, within the nation of Israel, topics like that have been discussed and worked through to understand what is the will of God. It's not a new thing that Muhammad came and had some kind of idea that the Bnei Israel status of the Bnei Israel was displaced. One of the, to come into dialogue, if I'm going to continue to refer to where I live in Tekoa as the Judean hills, Har Yehuda, and you're going to continue to relate to it as Palestine, there's certain tolerance for differences of words, differences of nomenclature. In fact, I might be speaking to Nas Daily and his audience, but mostly Nas, right? I think your name is Nas. Can we both agree that the Torah, here it's translated by, this translation was made by Rabbi Rav Sadia Gaon. Sadia Gaon, and you can see the dates there, right? So this translation was made somewhere between 882 and 942 of the current era, okay? 5 books of Moses translated. It's transcribed here into Arabic script by Rabbi Yom Tov Chaim ben Yaakov Dan Kirsha Cohen. If you read the Torah, you'll find a connection between the Bnei Israel and the children of Israel and the land of Israel. An ancient connection and divine connection, divine instructions on how to relate to this land. So the idea that you can look at my skin color. Okay, my father's family lived in Iraq before it was even Iraq, much before, when it was Babylon, Bavel, in Baghdad. He and his family were violently dispossessed in 1951, meaning while they'd lived there and established a name, a community, a reputation, a way of life, had property, pretty much overnight they were violently dispossessed. They were told they had to leave and could not sell their possessions or bring any of their possessions. This is all known and documented history. Okay, it's not widely spoken about. So if I could say, look, from a Jew to a Muslim or an Arab, can we understand each other, what it's like to be violently dispossessed? Yes, we can understand. Can we understand what it's like to take responsibility for decisions that have been made on a national level? We can both understand that. Another book I'd like to is much more recent. It's called Hamas versus Fatah, the struggle for Palestine. Okay? Anybody who's not read this book and thinks they know anything about what's going on in Israel, Palestine, it's recommended that you read this book. So if you read this book, here, the Torah, I think what you'll come to understand, be in contact with me if you don't understand, is that the Jewish people, which is one of the 12 tribes of Israel, didn't just appear from Europe, right? Again, my father, may live and be well, came from Baghdad, from Iraq, where they were there for thousands of years, right? We were familiar with the psalm, by the waters of Babylon there we sat and there we wept when we remembered Zion, right? This is, the waters of Babylon is the rivers, right? The Euphrates and there's 2 rivers there. So we've been taken captive. We have a history. A part of that history, in case you don't know, because I read Al Jazeera and I see the talkbacks, and one of the talkbacks in a documentary on the history of Palestine was one of the talkbacks there said, I always didn't understand why these people come from Europe and presume that they can do whatever they want here, right? So the idea that the Jews came from Europe, now that brings me back to my mother's side of the family, who were in Poland for several generations. That doesn't mean that they were from Europe. That doesn't mean they're European. We have to understand this. These are not European colonizers. Okay? These are Jews that were Bnei Israel who were living in Europe for several generations. Where they came from was Israel, right? And that's all, again, documented here and also in these books called the Bible, which is broken down into 3 parts: the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the Nevi'im, the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings. Okay, so I'm sure all that is also translated into Arabic. And what you could see there, you might see contradictions with the Quran at times. What you'll see if you want to come to check facts and history and artifacts, you'll see that their Torah is written much before the Quran. The Bible, the Tanakh, what we call in Hebrew the Tanakh, is written much before. And you can see that the Bnei Israel were exiled from the land of Israel. Okay, we were violently dispossessed then. We're violently dispossessed in a few exiles, okay, and dispersed around the world. Part of the places where we were dispersed, which includes pretty much all areas of the globe, included Europe. So when you saw, what you see is that there were continuous inhabitants of Bnei Israel in the land of Israel. If you look at the history, what you also see is that Bnei Israel coming from places like Iraq throughout the ages, and look in 1914, Bnei Israel came, what you might call Hajj, but Aliyah, what we call Aliyah, not just coming for a holiday, but coming to fulfill Allah's will that we will reside in the land. Some of the special relationship that we have with this land include Shemitah, resting the land every 7th year. And there's a lot of complicated details to that. I'm not going to go into that, but that is a relationship that Am Yisrael, again, which the Yehudim, the Jews, are one of 12 of the tribes, have one of the many, many, many connections that we have, and we've had for thousands of years to this land, is Shemitah. Another one is the pilgrimages coming to Jerusalem that we've had much before the Al-Aqsa Mosque was there. Okay, back in the time of Solomon, who you might call Suleiman, King Shlomo, as we call him, Amelech Shlomo. So where can we come to an agreement? We can't come to an agreement on lies. A lot of what I've seen on Al Jazeera are lies. I saw on the Oxford campus was posed as a debate between the head of the Yesha Council. The Yesha Council was Yehuda, Shomron, and Aza, the council for Yehuda, the Judea, Sumeria, and Gaza in English. And the one who was moderating it was allowing blatant lies to be said there. I know this because I've lived in these lands for 20 years, and if you've traveled also, and let's just call it the disputed territories, while I would call it the Judean hills. The claims that were made on that Al Jazeera debate were false claims. And if you've lived as I have in these areas, you know that. You know that the apartheid is a false claim. You know that if there is an apartheid, it's an apartheid against Israelis. That's why there are red signs all over Judea and Samaria saying what they say, Israelis are prohibited from entering here. While Palestinians can easily get work permits if they have a clean record of violence and their family has a clean record of violence, and they can get work permits. And there are plenty of places where they don't need any permits to enter, like the Rami Levy supermarket. There is no security checkpoint for them to come shop at a Jewish establishment. At least there hadn't been till now, right? Until there is violence that has been awful, terrible, horrendous violence. Now, a little bit about me. I grew up in San Francisco. You're going to say, oh, you came from San Francisco. Back to San Francisco, you should go. Back to Auschwitz, you should go. Perhaps you say back to Baghdad. Well, one thing I could say is, go ahead and why don't you go back to, you can take my place in San Francisco, or you can take my place in Baghdad, where our family had assets, and leave us to be Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael without violence. Okay? Would you like to know the street where my family's house was in Baghdad? Would you like to know the design of the architecture of the house, which was violently dispossessed for us? You might be saying, well, two wrongs don't make a right. No, I'm saying make a decision. Okay? I'm saying both of these, again, not going to debate here against nobody, but both of these are on false premises. The idea that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, meaning ethnically cleansed of Jews, right? Let's finish that off. Will be free of Jews is what people are shouting, what they mean. They don't mean civil freedoms, because those people have. And I've witnessed this, and I've lived with this for 20 years. Gaza was evacuated of Gush Katif. The settlements in Gaza, the Jewish settlements in Gaza, were evacuated in my time here in Israel. What happened there, I'm speaking, I guess, also to my leftist cousin Lior here. What happened was Hamas came in, whether they were elected there or they forced the election to go their way, and started espousing violence, anti-Semitism. When I say anti-Semitism, I mean genocidal barbarianism, and digging tunnels and amassing missiles and firing missiles year after year. That's what happens when the territory that was won in the Six-Day War has been turned over to the Palestinians. The Palestinian people have a track record, especially in Gaza, for choosing Hamas, for choosing violence, for choosing death. Let's get clear about another thing. What does it mean Palestinian? There was a period in time not so long ago when Palestinian passports, IDs, were issued to all residents of what was then called the occupied territories, the British Mandate. The territory is known as Palestine. So Palestinian identity included Jews. Jews would be Palestinians. What the word Palestinian as an identity, as a name, has come to mean is now the eradication of Jews. Jews would have had Palestinian passports. Now, what makes a national identity or an ethnic identity or religious identity? Those are nice subjects to be looked at maybe through a lens of anthropology or sociology. We're talking about life and death here. We need a process of getting to yes. Starting with giving up on the victimhood mentality. A process to peace is much more simple. Return the captives. Stop harming them immediately and return them home. Then acknowledge that human life is of value. Then acknowledge that Am Yisrael has a special connection with Eretz Yisrael. Acknowledge that a coexistence is going to be contingent on accepting the value of human life. Acknowledge the fact that Jews are humans, and therefore our lives have worth. Acknowledge the fact that Jews are one of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Acknowledge these facts. And then begin to live a prosperous life. No one's saying, bow down. No one's saying even live as we did in Iraq under the status of dhimmi. Paying special taxes just because we're not Muslim. We're not saying pay special taxes just because we're Palestinians. Look at the Palestinians in the West Bank. Jobs. The kind of treatment that I've seen the Jews give the Palestinians of the West Bank, free dental care. When a Jew would be working, doing a remodel on his home, hiring Palestinian workers, saying, oh, there's a TV I don't need anymore, giving it to the workers. throwing a nice feast at the end of a completion of a construction cycle and constructing a building for the workers. Acknowledge this. Overthrow Hamas from within. Overthrow Hamas from within. Overthrow Hamas from within Gaza. Rise up. They don't care about your lives. You know, every Israeli cares about your life much more than Hamas. Overthrow them. Someone puts up a Hamas flag, cut it down with any means you can. Cut down any Hamas flag. If you have to break a bottle, then break that bottle and use the glass to cut down the flag. If someone offers you money to operate as a Hamas operative, take up arms against them. Because they don't, not only do they not care about you, my dear Palestinian brother, and I'm saying this after I've been ambushed last week at night on a dark road by masked terrorists, Palestinian terrorists, who blocked the road in pitch black and threw rocks at me in my vehicle. Thank God dented my vehicle and didn't damage me. I'm saying it the week after. I'm calling you my Palestinian brother. Grab a hold of these books. And make the same decision. Take arms against Hamas operatives. Read the book Son of Hamas by the son of the founder of Hamas. Make a decision that could save your nation. I do understand that Palestinians are now a nation, and it doesn't mean what it meant in the 1920s and 1930s. Palestinian doesn't now mean what it once meant, where you could have Jewish Palestinians, Christian Palestinians, and Muslim Palestinians. The meaning of the word Palestinian, thank you, Hamas, has changed. Reclaim your noble identity, Palestinians. You claim to have a noble identity as a Palestinian, to have a culture, reclaim it. And take a stand against the insanity and the violence. Nas Daily, I call upon you to make this call as well, to make those acknowledgments as well. I call on every Jew from an Arabian descent. I call on Jimena. I call on Sarah Krames from Jimena. Every Jew like myself who has Arabian ancestry, where our ancestors lived in Arabian territories, to explain our identity is not European colonialist. Neither are the European Jews. But this idea that the face of Israel is a European colony, only the skin color of you and me, the features of you and me, which demonstrate that we lived in non-European countries, in fact Arab countries, for thousands of years, can give that testimony. Let's debunk the myths. Let's work together. Work more towards moderation, towards sanity. Acknowledge basic facts. I want to acknowledge your existence, my Palestinian brother. I want you to acknowledge mine. We can find places of agreement. All life is sacred. Can we start there? This land has been sometimes called Palestine and has sometimes been called Israel, has sometimes been called Judea. Can we start with the facts? Can we start with our common agreements and work from there towards shalom,